welcome to Conversation Groups. So glad to have Pastor Aaron here with us. Thanks for joining us today on this Legacy Sunday weekend.
It's a great weekend. Love the fact that we'll take some time. We're going to celebrate some people that have given so much of their lives to helping the church and being a part of the life of the church. And also it's a great opportunity for us to look ahead and to see, just to lean into what we believe God is calling us to do, who we believe God is calling us to be. And I'm excited about Legacy Sunday 2023.
Cool. So thanks for joining us for that. As we get into that, you're going to be sharing a passage of Scripture. We'll get into that in our groups, but that passage of Scripture talks about remembering the faithfulness of God.
Yeah.
So we'll start off with maybe share a story of where you've seen the faithfulness of God work in your own life or family's life.
Yeah. I think about even recently in 2020, like all of us, I think, can identify with like how hard life was, the challenges, the challenges of feeling like feeling disconnected from community, what it felt like to go through even just some of the challenges in our society, and that feeling of the isolation and disconnectedness in our own society with people and people groups. But I can look back and see how over time, even in the midst of some of the lowest moments, some of the hardest moments, some of the most discouraging moments, God continued to be present with me and to help me and to remind me. Like I even shared this morning coming into the office that this old song that I used to listen to when, early, back in the early 2000s, called Trading My Sorrows. And I was thinking like just looking back on that and seeing like even in the hard times, even in the times where it felt like things were pressing in and it was, I couldn't see, there were moments in the midst of all that, I felt like I couldn't see past the wall, like I couldn't see past my hands, and then to get on the other side of that and to look back and see how faithful God was and continues to be was pretty amazing experience. And like even in reconnecting with people, even bringing new people into my life, even, what I mean? Those real ways that God sustained me, I felt like was so real in that season.
Yeah, it's always good to remember where we've kind of come from so we can move towards what God has for us next.
Yeah.
The other question is, why is it important for us to remember the faithfulness of God in the past? So you remember those times that were so hard and God brought you through it.
Yeah.
Why is that important?
Well, I think part of that is because of life. You're always going to have hard, difficult times. Anybody who's lived any amount of time knows that life is hard. And so I think when we get into those hard moments, it's in those moments where we feel like we can't see past our hands, where we feel like the fog of life and discouragement, whether it be in a job situation, maybe you didn't get that job you had applied for, or you didn't get that raise or that, new position that you had wanted to be a part of. Maybe it's in seeking out a relationship with someone and it didn't work out, like everybody has these moments and it feels like the moment is going to overwhelm you. But when we look back and we're able to say, no, I've been through moments and God has been there with me. And I think that's why it's so important, is that if God has been with us in the past, he's going to be with us currently, and he will be with us in the future.
Yeah, so it helps definitely during those discouraging times. But for me, even in those encouraging times, I'm a very type A person. And so I can just keep going to the next thing and the next thing without actually stopping to celebrate what has just taken place and what God has just done, to the point where I'm like, why am I so burned out? Well, it's because I didn't pause to celebrate what God has done.
And I think you got a great point there. It's even when we are what we would say, the analogy is on the mountain or in the valley, right? When we're on the mountain, to pause, to recognize the mountaintop experience.
Yeah.
because there will be a valley
Sure.
ahead of us,
Sure.
right?
Does there have to be?
There just is, right? Like that's just, yeah. But again, I've been in this thing about like old songs. He's the God of the mountain and he's the God in the valley, right?
Yeah, it's
So
good.
anyway,
It's good. Kind of our next question, getting into the scripture. So you've got a scripture that you want to share with us as a church this weekend, coming out of Joshua 4. Maybe set us up to it, and then I'll read that.
So
passage.
the background here, the story is the people of Israel have been wandering in the wilderness, in the desert. They in particularly, a generation has gone by who had been wandering in the wilderness because of their unfaithfulness, right? Because of the things that they had done, and now they have gotten to the place where the new generation is ready to go into the promised land and to cross the Jordan River, and God is bringing them through that. And so, in this story in Joshua, we find them crossing the river, and their leader Joshua, who is the one that follows Moses, is going to lead them, and he has specific instructions for them. One of the things that we find in this story is the part about the Ark of the Covenant, which for them was what they had, almost like a traveling temple, right? Like something that they carried with them that was to remind them that God's presence was right there with them. And so that's what this story talks about as they prepare and they go through the river into the promised land.
Yeah, and I really like Joshua's leadership in that, like, this generation is going to be different. Like, we are going to remember. Yeah. So kind of picking up his story there, it says, so Joshua called together the 12 men he had chosen, one from each of the tribes of Israel. He told them, go into the middle of the Jordan in front of the ark of the Lord your God. Each of you must pick up one stone and carry it out on your shoulder, 12 stones in all, one for each of the 12 tribes of Israel. Like, we're all included in this. We're all going to remember. We will use these stones to build a memorial. In the future, your children will ask you, what do these stones mean? Then you can tell them. They remind us that the Jordan River stopped flowing when the Ark of the Lord's covenant went across. These stones will stand as a memorial among the people of Israel forever. So why was it so important for them to say, we're going to remember?
Well, I think we hit on this just a little bit. They had a cycle of forgetfulness, right? Where God would be faithful. They would have a season of things were going great. Then things would get rough and they would forget. And they would even whine and complain about it was better to be slaves in Egypt than to be where we are. Yeah. And I think you hit it on right where you talked about as they came through the river, Joshua is saying, we are going to be different. This is different. We will remember because we know it's like we forget so easily and we fall back so easily. And so to put this memorial down to say, remember what God has done. Remember. And this isn't the only time they do this kind of stuff, right? That's the whole idea of the Passover that they've already been, that they began because of coming out of Israel. These moments where they would remember the story and remember the story of God and the work that God was doing in their lives and in their people group. And eventually we see this into the future. We get to Jesus, and the reason that we receive the Lord's Supper every single week to remind us, a forgetful people.
Because we never forget.
We forget so easily. And ultimately that's what the cross was, right? The cross is a reminder that at this point in history, what God has done, let us never forget what God has done for us.
I think that's even what baptism does for us. It puts that marker, a mile marker in our life that yes, I have decided I'm following Jesus. And when it gets hard, I can remember that.
Absolutely.
I have chosen to follow him. I'm going to continue to follow him.
Yeah.
Kind of along the same lines, we got the question, how does sharing our stories help the generations after us to know God? I know just this last week I was doing some research on student ministry and what are some of the best practices, core behaviors that help students stick with their faith after graduating high school. And one of them was they grew up in families that retold the family story of God's faithfulness. And I thought, wow. And especially last week, as I shared the story of my grandfather coming to faith and how that started a new faith generation, even that impacted me. I wanted to call my dad just to make sure I had the story right. And he was even kind of fumbling over, like, I think it was this. And then I, talking with my brother and sister, they were like, we've never heard this story. And I was like, wow, like that's our family faith journey. Like, we can't forget this, that God did something amazing through the boldness of my grandmother. And so things get lost if we don't share.
And that's why I love the fact that this is part of Legacy Sunday. And as a church, we are 97 years old. And to be part of a church that has people that sacrificially gave so that there would be a reminder right here in Southwest Charlotte of God's faithfulness, God's love, and that we can live in a relationship with God where God is perfecting his love in us, right? Like we can become known for love wherever we go. And I love that we're still here, and God is still doing a new thing in and through Pineville Church.
And kind of like Joshua, like, now's our time.
Yes.
So, cool. Well, I hope you have a great time discussing the faithfulness of God in your own lives and in your family's lives, just sharing those stories, diving into this passage of Scripture. Would encourage you this week, go back, read Joshua chapter 3, chapter 4, and just kind of soak in this story and have a good time just remembering God's faithfulness. As always, we hope you'll be a group that's known for love. Have a great week.